You have 30 seconds to open this gate or we cut it. 6:03 a.m. 3 hired thugs with bolt cutters stand outside my chicken coop. Leading them, Deborah Westfield, our psychotic HOA president who fined me $500 because my rooster looked at her aggressively. 4 months of hell, fake complaints, bogus inspections, anonymous tips to animal control. This woman has tried everything to steal my property through harassment. Today she brought felony tools. But while Deborah's been plotting my destruction, I've been setting the perfect trap. Every illegal move, every threat, every midnight trespass has led to this moment. Gravel crunches, metal snaps open, steam rises from my coffee as I watch through my window, barely containing my excitement. In 2 minutes, Deborah's about to discover that some farmers have very dangerous friends. Today, she picked the wrong damn farm. Drop your craziest HOA stories below. Which state breeds the worst neighborhood dictators? Hit subscribe. You're about to witness the most satisfying takedown in HOA history. My name's Rex Hawthorne, and 6 months ago, I thought retirement would be peaceful. 30 years as an electrician in Houston taught me that paradise costs exactly $340,000, the price of 3 acres in Willowbrook Estates with a functioning farm operation. The seller, old Pete Morrison, had been raising chickens here since 1987 under full HOA protection. Grandfathered agricultural use, he said, patting the covenant paperwork. Bulletproof legal. Turns out bullets come in different calibers. My first month was perfect. Morning coffee on the porch, listening to Napoleon, my prize rooster, announce the sunrise while 12 hens scratched happily in the dirt. The red barn smelled like sweet hay and decades of honest work. Even had a greenhouse where I started growing tomatoes that actually tasted like tomatoes instead of cardboard. Then Deborah Westfield bought the McMansion next door and decided my chickens were lowering her property values. First meeting, 7 a.m. sharp, her standing at my fence in a white blazer that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Portfolio clutched like a weapon, blonde hair yanked back so tight it could deflect bullets. Rex Hawthorne, Deborah Westfield, HOA president. We need to discuss your livestock situation. The way she said livestock, like I was raising plague rats, should have been warning enough. What situation? Everything's legal and grandfathered. That smile could have frozen hell. Covenants evolve, Rex. This neighborhood has elevated standards now. I'm sure we can find a mutually beneficial solution. Translation: get rid of the farm or die trying. See, Deborah sells luxury rural estates to city folks who want the country experience without any actual country. Roosters crowing, unacceptable. Tractors running, disturbing the peace. The faint earthy scent of well-managed farm life? Offensive odors requiring immediate abatement. 2 weeks later, my first $200 noise violation. Napoleon's crime? Crowing at sunrise like every rooster since the dawn of agriculture. I showed her the state agricultural protection laws. Her response? Another $200 fine for repeat offenses. Then came the anonymous complaints. Animal control visited 3 times, claiming my chickens were diseased and dangerous. Code enforcement showed up hunting for unlicensed commercial activity. Each inspector left confused and apologetic after seeing my immaculate operation. But Deborah's masterstroke came at last month's HOA meeting. Picture 50 neighbors crammed into the community center, Martha Kowalski's cookies making everything smell homey, while Deborah unveiled her PowerPoint presentation, maintaining property values through strategic improvements. Slide 12 made my blood boil. An aerial photo of my property with giant red arrows pointing to every structure, labeled Priority Removal Targets for Phase 1 Beautification. My chicken coops, my greenhouse, even Napoleon's favorite perch. As you can see, Deborah explained sweetly, certain legacy elements create visual pollution that directly impacts our collective property values. I've commissioned studies showing agricultural elimination could increase neighborhood values by 12%. Martha raised her hand. Deborah, Rex's farm is charming. My grandkids love visiting the chickens. Sentiment doesn't pay mortgages, Martha. Progress requires difficult decisions. That's when I realized this wasn't about noise complaints or property values. This was about power. Deborah wanted to prove she could eliminate anyone who didn't fit her suburban fantasy, starting with the stubborn old electrician and his chickens. The meeting ended with her announcing a comprehensive property review to identify additional improvement opportunities. The way she looked directly at me while saying it made her intentions crystal clear. Walking home that night, gravel crunching under my boots while Napoleon settled his girls into their roosts, I made a decision that would change everything. If Deborah Westfield wanted to play games with a country boy who'd spent 3 decades dealing with the nastiest contractors in Houston, she was about to learn why you don't mess with people who know exactly how systems really work. Game on, lady. The next morning, I woke up to Napoleon going absolutely ballistic. Not his usual sunrise crow. This was full combat mode. Aggressive squawking, wings flapping, the kind of racket he only made when something was seriously wrong. I grabbed my coffee and rushed outside to find 3 men in orange vests measuring my property line with surveying equipment at 6:30 a.m. on a Saturday. "Morning, gentlemen," I called out, walking over in my bathrobe. "Y'all seem to be on my property without permission." The lead surveyor, a sweaty guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, held up an official-looking document. "HOA property inspection, sir. We're checking for covenant violations and boundary discrepancies." Boundary discrepancies, right. That's when I spotted Deborah's white Lexus parked across the street, engine running, her blonde head visible through the windshield as she supervised her little operation like a general watching a battlefield. The woman couldn't even be bothered to get out of her air conditioning to personally harass me. Now here's the thing these weekend warriors didn't know about old electricians. We spend 3 decades reading blueprints and property surveys. You can't run wire through walls without knowing exactly where those walls legally sit. So while they were busy with their measuring tape theater, I was mentally cataloging every procedural violation they were committing. "Can I see that inspection order?" I asked politely. The paperwork was complete garbage. Wrong property description, no official HOA seal, and most importantly, no advance notification as required by our covenants. This wasn't an inspection, it was harassment with surveying equipment. But I let them finish their little charade. Sometimes you've got to let people dig their own holes before you bury them in it. 20 minutes later, they packed up and drove away, Deborah's Lexus following like a shark trailing blood. That afternoon, I made my first real strategic move. Drove straight to the county recorder's office, a squat brick building that smells like old paper and decades of bureaucratic desperation. The clerk, a tired woman who'd probably seen every property dispute in the county, charged me $40 in copy fees. But I walked out with every survey, deed, and covenant document related to Willowbrook Estates dating back to 1982. My daddy always told me that knowledge was power, but documentation was ammunition. 30 years dealing with contractors taught me that the guy with the best paperwork usually wins the fight. So I spread everything across my kitchen table and started reading like my life depended on it. What I found made me smile like Christmas morning. Deborah's survey team had measured the wrong damn fence. The actual property line, according to the original 1987 survey, ran 3 feet into what she thought was her precious rose garden. Her expensive underground sprinkler system, that fancy setup she'd bragged about at the community meeting, was sitting completely on HOA common land. But here's where it got beautiful. She'd installed that system without Architectural Review Committee approval, violating the exact same covenant process she was always lecturing everyone else about. Miss Elevated Standards had been breaking her own rules for months. I spent Sunday afternoon taking photographs, documenting every sprinkler head, every piece of PVC pipe, every rose bush that was technically trespassing on community property. The sweet irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Monday morning, I filed my counterattack. Not with Deborah, straight to the county zoning office requesting an official boundary survey. Cost me $800, but worth every penny to watch her reaction when that certified letter hit her mailbox. She called that evening, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. I could practically hear her white blazer rustling with indignation. "Rex, I understand you've requested an official property survey. That seems unnecessarily escalatory. Just want to make sure we're all following the rules, Deborah. You're always talking about maintaining standards." Long pause. The kind of silence that comes before lightning strikes. I hope you understand that this kind of aggressive behavior reflects poorly on neighborhood harmony. Good neighbors work together to resolve disputes amicably. Funny thing about that, good neighbors usually don't send unlicensed surveyors onto other people's property at dawn on weekends. Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice had dropped to that cold, calculated tone that meant someone was about to get hurt. "Rex, I'd hate for your agricultural activities to come under increased scrutiny from county officials. Sometimes when you invite government attention, you get more than you bargained for." The threat was crystal clear. Push back, and she'd escalate to code enforcement, environmental inspectors, anyone who could make my life miserable. But threats work both ways, and this old electrician had learned a few things about pressure over the years. Deborah, I'd hate for your landscaping to come under increased scrutiny from the Architectural Review Committee. Sometimes when you violate your own covenants, people notice patterns. Dead silence. I could almost hear her brain processing the implications. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Have a good evening. I hung up and poured myself a bourbon, listening to my chickens settling in for the night. The air smelled like summer grass and approaching thunderstorms. Round one to the farmer, but I knew this was just the opening move in a much longer game. Deborah's revenge arrived like a slap in the face at 7 a.m. Tuesday morning, a cease and desist letter taped to my front door with enough red ink to paint a barn. Notice of immediate covenant violation. Unauthorized agricultural expansion detected. Compliance required within 48 hours or face daily fines of $500. Agricultural expansion? I'd been running the exact same operation for 6 months. Hell, I'd actually removed some of Pete Morrison's old equipment to clean things up. But there, attached like evidence of war crimes, were telephoto photos of my property with red circles drawn around my greenhouse, compost pile, and the tiny herb garden behind my barn. Every single structure that had been legal for 35 years was suddenly an unauthorized recent addition. The woman was literally rewriting history with a Sharpie. I was still marveling at this work of creative fiction when my phone buzzed. Martha Kowalski's voice cut through the morning air, tight with barely contained fury. Rex, that woman is going door to door with lies that would make Satan blush. She's telling people your farm is a health hazard and you're planning to bring in commercial livestock operations. My coffee turned bitter in my mouth. What kind of lies? Oh, honey, she's got a whole presentation, pictures of factory farms, statistics about property values, the works. She needs 15 signatures for an emergency board meeting, and she's already got 12 people convinced you're turning this place into a cattle ranch. An emergency meeting, of course. When you can't win through normal channels, manufacture a crisis and ram through your agenda before anyone can think straight. But here's what 3 decades of electrical work taught me. When someone's trying to rush you into signing something, that's exactly when you need to slow down and read the fine print. So I spent Tuesday afternoon at the county courthouse, this time hunting through the building inspector's records. What I found made my day brighter than a Texas sunrise. Deborah's pristine McMansion was built on a foundation of shortcuts and corner cutting that would make a carnival contractor blush. Her septic system was unpermitted. Her outdoor kitchen was a code violation waiting to happen. And that fancy pergola she loved photographing for her real estate listings. Pure illegal construction worth about $80,000 in fines if anyone ever bothered to report it. Carlos, the building inspector clerk who'd grown up on his grandfather's ranch, whistled low when he saw the violations. Brother, if code enforcement ever did a surprise visit here, this lady would be looking at tear-down orders and enough fines to buy a new truck. The smell of old paper and bureaucratic justice filled my nostrils as I made copies of everything. Sweet, sweet documentation. That evening, I drove to Martha's house for coffee and conspiracy. Her kitchen smelled like cinnamon and righteous indignation as she spread out her own research across the table. Rex, she's planning to blindside you at tomorrow's emergency meeting with prepared talking points about agricultural contamination and neighborhood safety. But here's where it gets interesting. My grandson taught me how to legally record conversations. Martha, it turned out, had been documenting Deborah's door-to-door campaign like a war correspondent. Every lie, every exaggeration, every slanderous claim about my disease-carrying livestock was captured in crystal-clear audio. She actually told the Hendersons that your chickens might give their grandkids bird flu, Martha said, her teacher voice dripping with disgust. Then she suggested they could sue you for knowingly maintaining a health hazard. Defamation, slander, and in Texas, you can file criminal charges for that level of malicious falsehood. The emergency meeting was Thursday at 7 p.m. Deborah thought she had orchestrated the perfect ambush, angry neighbors, manufactured urgency, and a rushed vote before I could mount a defense. She had no clue I was walking into that room with enough ammunition to level her entire operation. Wednesday morning brought one final gift from the bureaucracy gods. My official county boundary survey arrived via certified mail, confirming what I already knew. Deborah's sprinkler system was illegally installed on common property, and her precious rose garden violated setback requirements by a country mile. I called the county surveyor to confirm the implications, barely containing my glee. "Mr. Hawthorne, those improvements are clear easement violations. If someone filed a complaint, the HOA would face county fines until everything gets removed. We're talking thousands of dollars in penalties." I hung up and walked outside to check on my girls, breathing in the earthy scent of honest dirt and chicken manure while Napoleon announced his dominance over the morning. The air tasted like victory and approaching thunderstorms. Tomorrow night, Deborah Westfield was going to discover what happens when you pick a fight with someone who actually knows how to use a shovel. Time to dig this woman's professional grave with her own paperwork. Thursday night arrived with the kind of humid tension that makes smart people stay indoors and dumb people start fights. The community center was packed tighter than a rush-hour subway car. Folding chairs arranged in hostile rows, the smell of burnt coffee and Martha's stress-baked cookies mixing with the electric anticipation of a neighborhood about to tear itself apart. I counted 43 people crammed into a space meant for 30, most of them clutching Deborah's propaganda packets like holy scripture. Deborah held court at the front table in her signature white blazer, looking like a prosecuting attorney about to deliver a death sentence. Behind her, a professionally printed poster board displayed agricultural violations and neighborhood impact in letters big enough to read from space. The woman had turned my chicken coop into a PowerPoint presentation. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice carrying that artificial sweetness that always preceded character assassination. "Tonight we address a serious threat to our community's safety, property values, and quality of life." She clicked through slides like a seasoned performer. Aerial photos of my property with ominous red circles. Statistics about agricultural operations and property depreciation. Stock footage of commercial livestock facilities that looked nothing like my modest operation, but sure looked scary when projected on a wall. "As you can see," Deborah continued, gesturing toward a photo of my perfectly legal greenhouse, "unauthorized expansion continues despite repeated warnings. We're facing potential zoning violations, health hazards, and significant liability exposure." Tom Bradley, my landscaper neighbor, raised his hand tentatively. "Deborah, I drive past Rex's place every day. It looks pretty clean to me. Better than some yards in here, honestly." Deborah's smile could have flash-frozen margaritas. "Tom, I appreciate your perspective, but we're dealing with documented covenant violations backed by professional assessment. This isn't about personal opinions. It's about protecting everyone's investment. Professional assessment." I almost choked on my coffee. Her professional assessment was 3 guys with measuring tape who couldn't read a property survey if their lives depended on it. But I let her finish her show. Sometimes you have to let people climb all the way out on a limb before you start sawing. 20 minutes of fear-mongering later, Deborah called for the vote. All in favor of immediate enforcement action against the unauthorized agricultural expansion? Hands shot up around the room. I counted 12, exactly what Martha had predicted. Enough for her emergency powers, but not enough for the 2/3 majority needed to actually change covenants. "Excuse me," I said, standing up from the back row. "Before we vote on anything, I'd like to share some information that might be relevant." Deborah's face went pale beneath her foundation. "Rex, this is a board meeting, not an open forum. Actually, according to Section 12 of our covenants, any property owner has the right to present evidence relevant to enforcement actions, especially when those actions might constitute harassment or discriminatory targeting." The room went dead silent. You could hear the air conditioning unit struggling against the Texas humidity. I walked to the front, pulling out my folder of county documents. "See, I spent some time at the courthouse this week, checking on everyone's compliance with building codes and zoning requirements. Fascinating reading." Martha started recording on her phone. Bless that woman's tactical mind. "For instance," I continued, spreading out the boundary survey, "turns out our HOA president's sprinkler system is installed entirely on common property without architectural review approval. That's about $15,000 worth of unpermitted improvements that violate our own covenants." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Deborah's white blazer was starting to show stress stains. "Furthermore," I said, pulling out the building inspection records, "her outdoor kitchen and pergola represent approximately $80,000 in unpermitted construction that doesn't match county records. If someone were to file a complaint with code enforcement—" "This is irrelevant to tonight's agenda," Deborah snapped, but her voice cracked like thin ice. "Oh, but it gets better. Martha, would you mind playing that recording from yesterday? Martha's phone speakers filled the room with Deborah's voice, crystal clear and damning. Rex's chickens are carrying diseases that could affect children. The county should have shut him down months ago for public health violations. Dead silence. Then Tom Bradley started laughing, a deep, genuine belly laugh that spread through the room like wildfire. "Deborah," said Mrs. Henderson from the third row, "are you seriously accusing Rex of running a disease farm while your own property is built illegally?" The meeting dissolved into chaos, neighbors demanding explanations, board members distancing themselves from Deborah's crusade, someone calling for her resignation as president. But the beautiful moment, the one I'd replay in my head for months, was watching Deborah realize she'd been outplayed by a retired electrician with a library card and too much time on his hands. She gathered her materials with shaking hands, muttering about procedural violations and legal counsel, before storming out into the humid night. Her car door slammed with the finality of a coffin lid. Martha squeezed my shoulder as the crowd dispersed. "Rex, honey, that was the most beautiful thing I've seen since my granddaughter's graduation." Walking home under a star-filled sky, listening to Napoleon's distant crow and smelling the sweet night air mixed with honeysuckle, I allowed myself one moment of satisfaction. Round 2 to the farmer. But knowing Deborah, this war was far from over. The manila envelope slipped through my mail slot at 3 a.m. Saturday like a confession from someone's guilty conscience. No postmark, no return address, just R. Hawthorne, written in careful block letters across paper that smelled like courthouse dust and fresh betrayal. I nearly tossed it with the junk mail until I felt the weight, thick documents that rustled with importance as I carried them to my kitchen table. Napoleon's distant crow mixed with the rustle of papers as I opened what would change everything. Email printouts, real estate contracts, bank transfer receipts. At the bottom, a handwritten note in shaky script. "They're planning to destroy all of us. Check the dates. This has to stop." Someone who can't sleep at night. My coffee turned cold as the conspiracy unfolded across my kitchen table like a roadmap to hell. The first email was dated 6 months ago, 2 weeks before I'd even seen my property listing. Deborah writing to Jay Morrison about accelerated timeline for agricultural elimination and target acquisition phase 1 completion. Jay Morrison. Jason Morrison. Pete's son who'd sold me the farm for what I'd stupidly thought was family generosity. The betrayal hit like a punch to the gut. Jason had sold me the property knowing his development partners were already planning my destruction. I wasn't buying a retirement dream. I was being set up as the fall guy in their $1 million land grab. More emails revealed the scope. Deborah wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was a paid consultant for Morrison Development Group, earning $47,000 to facilitate community compliance and eliminate grandfathered agricultural protections. She'd been hired to destroy me from day one. The smoking gun was a county planning document dated last month. Willowbrook Gardens luxury subdivision. 12 custom homes starting at $800,000 each, built on my 3 acres plus 5 neighboring agricultural properties currently protected by grandfathering laws. The math was simple. Force out the farmers, eliminate agricultural protections, flip to residential zoning, transform $2 million in farmland into $15 million in luxury lots. My hands shook as I read the construction timeline. Phase 1. Complete agricultural elimination by December 2024. Phase 2. Residential conversion and infrastructure development. They weren't just coming for my chickens. They were systematically targeting every farming operation in the county. The phone rang, making me jump. Martha's voice cut through my shock like cold water. "Rex, honey, I've been talking to neighbors all morning. Deborah's been visiting other agricultural properties too. The Pattersons with their horses, the Kowalski family with goats, even old Frank with his vegetable stand. Same routine every time. Have you considered more profitable land use options?" The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. 8 agricultural properties, 8 families who'd built lives around the land. All obstacles to Morrison Development's profit margins. "Martha, who do you think sent me these documents?" A long pause. "Honey, Jason Morrison's been drinking himself to sleep every night since his daddy died. Word around town is he's got terrible guilt about something. Maybe his conscience finally kicked in." I stared at the evidence spread across my table. Bank statements, development plans, email trails documenting months of calculated harassment designed to steal people's livelihoods for corporate profits. The metallic taste of rage filled my mouth as I thought about Deborah's smug face at the community meeting, knowing she was playing a rigged game while I thought we were having an honest dispute about chickens. But anger was a luxury I couldn't afford. These documents were evidence of conspiracy, fraud, and possibly racketeering. The kind of evidence that interested people with badges and subpoena power. Time to make some very important phone calls. Sheriff Martinez was about to learn that my little HOA dispute was actually a federal crime in progress. Deborah thought she was playing chess with a farmer. She had no idea she'd been boxing with someone who was about to call in the FBI. Sheriff Martinez sat across from me in my kitchen Monday morning, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he photographed each document. The smell of fresh coffee couldn't mask the stench of corruption filling my small farmhouse as a 20-year law enforcement veteran realized he'd been played by criminals in designer blazers. "Jesus Christ, Rex," he muttered, shaking his head at the bank transfer records. "This isn't some HOA power trip. This is organized fraud. They've been running a con game on your entire neighborhood." Martinez had known Pete Morrison since they were kids, hunting rabbits in these same fields. Watching him process Jason's betrayal was like watching someone discover their family Bible was printed on counterfeit money. "Jim, there's more," I said, sliding Martha's audio recordings across the table. "We've got Deborah on tape claiming my chickens carry diseases that could hurt children. In Texas, that's criminal defamation if it impacts someone's business." He listened to the recordings with the focused intensity of a man building a case that would end careers. The scratch of his pen on legal pad mixed with Napoleon's distant crowing as he took notes in the careful handwriting of someone who'd testified in hundreds of court cases. "Rex, I'm calling the county prosecutor this morning, but if we move too fast, they'll destroy evidence and hire lawyers who cost more than your farm. We need them to hang themselves completely." That's when Martha burst through my door carrying oatmeal cookies and enough righteous fury to power half of Texas. "Boys, we've got ourselves a beautiful opportunity," she announced, settling into my kitchen chair like a general planning the invasion of Normandy. "Carol Patterson just called. Deborah's scheduled a meeting Wednesday to discuss maximizing the potential of her horse property. Same sales pitch she's been giving everyone." Martinez's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "We could record that meeting. Get her admitting to the whole conspiracy." "Even better," Martha said with a grin that could have opened safes. "Carol's granddaughter is studying criminal justice at Sam Houston State. That girl can run surveillance equipment like it's a video game." For the next 3 hours, we planned an operation that would have made the FBI proud. Carol would wear recording equipment during her meeting. Martha would coordinate with other targeted farmers, building a network of witnesses and evidence. Martinez would work with prosecutors to prepare criminal charges. And me? I was going to do what 30 years of electrical work had taught me, find the technical weak points that everyone else missed. "Here's how these development scams work," Martinez explained, spreading county maps across my table. "They identify valuable properties with legal protections, then systematically harass owners through manufactured violations until people sell cheap or abandon their rights entirely." The genius was in the paper trail. Every fake fine, every bogus inspection, every threatening letter was evidence of conspiracy. But we needed to catch them actively planning to eliminate legal agricultural protections while knowing those protections were legitimate. "Jim, what if we gave them a chance to really incriminate themselves?" "How?" I opened my laptop, the keys clicking like dice in a game where the stakes were someone's entire life. "What if I sent Deborah an email saying I'm thinking about selling? Maybe mention that I'm tired of fighting and want to explore alternatives like she's suggested?" Martha clapped her hands, flour from her morning baking still dusting her fingers. "Rex, honey, that's pure genius. She'll think she's won and get careless with her mouth." We crafted that email like master fishermen preparing perfect bait, just enough desperation to seem real, but not so much that even Deborah's greed would find it suspicious. I mentioned the stress of constant legal battles, concerns about escalating costs, and interest in discussing options that might benefit everyone involved. Martinez reviewed every word like a prosecutor examining evidence. If she responds with anything about development plans or puts you in contact with Morrison Development, we've got written proof of conspiracy. But Martha's teaching experience provided the killing stroke. "Rex, you should copy the other board members on that email. Make it look like proper HOA procedure. If they know about the conspiracy, they'll either warn Deborah or try to save themselves." We sent the email Tuesday at 10 a.m., and waited like hunters in a blind. The response arrived so fast, Deborah must have been sitting on her computer like a spider on a web. "Rex! I'm absolutely delighted you're taking such a reasonable approach. I have contacts who specialize in agricultural transitions. Perhaps we could meet Thursday evening to discuss mutually beneficial arrangements. This could mark the beginning of a wonderfully harmonious neighborhood relationship." The woman was practically salivating through the screen. Hook, line, and sinker. Wednesday's recording session with Carol yielded pure prosecutorial gold. Deborah explicitly discussed development timelines, estimated profits after agricultural elimination, and expectations for converting the entire agricultural corridor to luxury residential use. She'd confessed to the whole conspiracy while thinking she was recruiting her next victim. Thursday evening, as I prepared for my meeting with Deborah, Martinez positioned surveillance teams while state prosecutor agents monitored everything from an unmarked van. Time to watch this suburban predator destroy herself with her own greed. Thursday evening arrived with the kind of oppressive heat that makes smart people stay indoors and criminals confess to federal agents. I sat in the community center conference room at 7 p.m., the smell of industrial carpet cleaner mixing with my nervous sweat, as I watched Deborah arrange her materials like a funeral director preparing a viewing. Her white blazer remained immaculate despite the humidity, blonde hair pulled back so tight it could deflect bullets. But tonight was different. There was a hungry eagerness in her movements that reminded me of a vulture circling roadkill. She thought she was about to feast on my surrender. If only she knew the roadkill was actually bait. "Rex, I'm so pleased you've decided to be reasonable," she purred, spreading glossy brochures across the table like tarot cards predicting my future. "I've brought information that will absolutely transform your perspective on possibilities." The brochures showcased luxury homes with lawns so perfect they looked photoshopped, swimming pools that sparkled like jewels, and not a single chicken anywhere. Willowbrook Gardens, where country charm meets modern luxury, starting prices at $800,000. My blood turned to ice water when I realized I was staring at architectural renderings of my own property. They'd already designed my farm's grave. "Beautiful homes," I managed, keeping my voice steady while the recording device in my shirt pocket captured every treacherous word. "But I'm not sure how this relates to my little chicken operation." Deborah's smile could have powered half of Dallas. "Rex, honey, you're sitting on an absolute gold mine. Your 3 acres represent over $2 million in development potential. We just need to eliminate the agricultural complications." Agricultural complications. 35 years of Pete Morrison's legacy reduced to an inconvenient detail in someone's profit margin. Complications, my operation's completely legal. Legal, yes, but entirely suboptimal for modern land use. She leaned forward conspiratorially, her expensive perfume mixing with the stale conference room air. "Rex, between us, agricultural grandfathering is an antiquated concept. Progressive communities demand progressive solutions." The woman was literally explaining how to destroy my legal protections while thinking I was her newest convert. Somewhere outside, Martinez's surveillance team was probably running out of recording space. "What kind of solutions?" I asked, playing the interested victim to perfection. Deborah produced a folder so thick it could have doubled as a weapon. "My partners at Morrison Development Group are specialists in agricultural transitions. They've successfully converted over 40 properties in 5 years, always with complete owner satisfaction and generous compensation." Complete owner satisfaction. I wondered how satisfied those owners felt after being harassed into bankruptcy before they voluntarily sold. "Sounds complex," I said. "Straightforward, actually." Her voice took on the practiced rhythm of someone who'd delivered this pitch dozens of times. "First, we document potential compliance issues with existing agricultural operations. Then we facilitate zoning transitions through appropriate county channels." Translation: manufacture violations until victims surrender or go broke fighting fabricated charges. "What about my neighbors? The Pattersons with their horses? Martha's vegetable garden?" Her eyes lit up like Christmas morning at a casino. "Rex, you're thinking like a true visionary. Optimal development requires comprehensive area conversion. We're already negotiating with multiple property owners about transitioning the entire agricultural corridor to luxury residential. She'd just confessed to a conspiracy spanning half the county, probably involving enough fraud to fund a small war. That's ambitious, I said, genuinely awed by the criminal scope. Ambitious projects require ambitious investment. Morrison Development has committed investors ready to deploy $50 million into this transformation. Your property is actually the cornerstone. Resolve your situation, and everything else follows naturally. $50 million. No wonder they'd been so ruthlessly aggressive. My modest chicken farm wasn't just inconvenient. It was the dam holding back a flood of development money. What would resolving my situation involve exactly? Deborah opened a contract folder with the reverence of someone unveiling the Holy Grail. Complete agricultural cessation, removal of all farming structures, and permanent deed restrictions preventing future agricultural use. In exchange, Morrison Development offers your property purchase at 30% above current assessed value. 30% above market for land they plan to flip for 10 times that amount. Such generous compensation. And if I prefer keeping my chickens? The mask slipped just enough to reveal the predator underneath. Her smile sharpened to razor edges. Rex, I genuinely hate watching you struggle with ongoing compliance challenges. HOA enforcement powers are quite extensive, and county officials take environmental health concerns extremely seriously. Legal battles can become financially devastating. There it was, the threat wrapped in silk, delivered with a smile, and recorded by federal agents who specialized in prosecuting exactly this kind of racketeering. I'll need time to consider this. Naturally, but Rex, market opportunities like this are ephemeral. Investor interest, regulatory climates, development windows, they shift rapidly. I'd hate seeing you miss this chance due to excessive deliberation. She packed her materials with the satisfied air of someone who just closed a multi-million-dollar deal, completely unaware she'd confessed to enough federal crimes to earn herself a prison sentence longer than my farm had been operating. Walking to my truck in the humid darkness, I called Martinez with trembling hands. Jim, we got everything. Conspiracy, fraud, criminal threats. She gift-wrapped a RICO case. Rex, you just handed us enough evidence to take down their entire operation. Give us 48 hours to coordinate with federal prosecutors. This goes all the way to the top now. Friday morning brought chaos wrapped in official letterhead and delivered with the subtlety of a freight train. I found the first envelope taped to my chicken coop at dawn. A cease and desist order from Morrison Development Legal Services demanding I stop interfering with legitimate business negotiations and threatening criminal harassment charges if I continued spreading malicious falsehoods about authorized development activities. The second envelope was tucked under my truck's windshield wiper. A notice from the county health department announcing a comprehensive agricultural inspection scheduled for Monday at 8 a.m., triggered by anonymous reports of potential zoonotic disease vectors and environmental contamination. The third envelope was the masterpiece, hand-delivered by a nervous kid in a courier uniform who apologized before speeding away. Inside was a formal complaint filed with the State Agricultural Board, signed by 12 neighbors, claiming my operation posed imminent health risks to the community and demanding immediate closure pending investigation. Deborah had declared nuclear war. I was still processing this coordinated assault when my phone started buzzing like an angry hornet. Martha's voice cut through the morning air sharp enough to slice steel. Rex, honey, you need to know what happened. Deborah spent yesterday evening visiting every house in the neighborhood with a petition and a briefcase full of lies that would make Satan take notes. She'd gone door to door with medical scare tactics that would have impressed propaganda ministers, claims about avian flu transmission, statistics about property value impacts from agricultural contamination, even photographs of commercial poultry operations that looked like biological weapons facilities. She told the Hendersons that chicken droppings could cause respiratory infections in children, Martha continued, her teacher voice vibrating with righteous fury. Showed them pictures of sick kids from some chicken farm disaster in Arkansas and claimed it was what happens when hobby farmers ignore safety protocols. The woman was weaponizing people's fears about their children's health to eliminate my legal protections. It was brilliant, ruthless, and completely criminal. But I'd learned something important about psychological warfare from 30 years of dealing with contractors who promised miracles and delivered disasters. Panic is contagious, but so is confidence. Martha, how many people actually signed her petition? 12 out of 43 households. Most folks slammed doors in her face once they realized what she was selling. But Rex, honey, those 12 signatures are enough for her emergency powers. Emergency powers. The HOA equivalent of martial law, allowing the board to take immediate action without normal procedural protections. If she pulled that trigger, I could be facing immediate fines, property liens, and forced compliance before any appeals process could save me. That's when Martinez called with news that made my coffee taste like liquid gold. Rex, we just finished coordinating with the FBI's white-collar crime unit. They've been watching Morrison Development for 18 months on suspicion of interstate fraud. Your recordings were exactly what they needed to move forward. Federal agents had been building a case against Morrison Development's operations across 3 states. Apparently, my little chicken farm controversy was just the latest episode in a pattern of agricultural property theft that stretched from Texas to Tennessee. Jim, what about those health department inspections she's triggered? Already handled. I called the county health supervisor this morning. Turns out Deborah's been filing anonymous complaints faster than a machine gun fires bullets. They're treating this as harassment now, not legitimate public health concerns. But Deborah's desperation was escalating beyond legal harassment into something that made my skin crawl. That afternoon, while I was working in the garden, I noticed someone had been in my greenhouse. Nothing obviously damaged, but tools moved slightly, plants disturbed, dirt tracked where it shouldn't be. Someone had been searching for something or preparing something. That evening, while feeding my chickens, I discovered what? Napoleon was acting strange, lethargic, refusing food, his usual proud strut replaced by unsteady wobbling. 2 of my hens were showing similar symptoms. I rushed them to the emergency veterinary clinic, my heart pounding as I realized what was happening. The blood tests confirmed my worst fears: deliberate poisoning with a slow-acting compound designed to mimic natural illness. Dr. Peterson, I asked the veterinarian, how long would it take for symptoms like this to appear? With this particular compound, 12 to 18 hours? Someone fed this to them yesterday evening or early this morning? Yesterday evening, right around the time Deborah was making her door-to-door visits, spreading panic about disease risks from my supposedly contaminated chickens. The psychological warfare was perfect. Poison my chickens to make them appear sick, then point to the illness as proof of the health hazards she'd been warning neighbors about. If I reported the poisoning, I'd look paranoid. If I didn't, she'd use their illness as evidence supporting her emergency powers. Driving home with 3 poisoned chickens in carriers, listening to their labored breathing while the smell of antiseptic clung to my clothes, I realized Deborah had crossed a line that changed everything. This wasn't about property development anymore. This was about someone willing to poison innocent animals to steal people's land. The kind of sociopathic behavior that federal prosecutors loved putting away for decades. I called Martinez as I pulled into my driveway, watching my property through new eyes, not as a farm under siege, but as a crime scene where someone had just escalated to felony animal cruelty. Jim, she poisoned my chickens. We've got her on attempted destruction of property and animal abuse. How fast can federal agents move? Rex, pack a bag and find somewhere else to sleep tonight. If she's willing to poison animals, there's no telling what she'll do when she realizes we're closing in. Saturday morning arrived like Judgment Day, wrapped in humidity and the smell of impending justice. The emergency HOA meeting had been moved to the high school auditorium to accommodate what Martha described as the biggest neighborhood turnout since the Great Christmas Decoration controversy of 2019. Word about federal investigations had spread through Willowbrook faster than gossip at a church social, and everyone wanted front row seats for Deborah's public execution. I walked into that auditorium at 9 a.m. sharp, carrying a briefcase full of evidence that could end careers and a confidence born from knowing the good guys were finally winning. The air buzzed with tension thick enough to cut with a knife as 200 residents filled seats designed for half that number. Deborah sat at the front table in her signature white blazer, but something was wrong with the picture. Her usual perfect composure had developed cracks, fidgeting hands, darting glances toward the exits, makeup that couldn't quite hide the stress lines around her eyes. Behind her, a man in an expensive suit whispered urgently into her ear while shuffling papers with the desperate efficiency of someone trying to contain a wildfire. That's when I spotted them. 3 men in unremarkable suits scattered throughout the audience, taking notes with the focused attention of people paid to remember every word. federal agents positioned like chess pieces around a board where checkmate was inevitable. "Thank you all for attending this emergency session," Deborah began, her voice carrying only half its usual authority. "We're here to address serious health and safety concerns that require immediate board action." She clicked through her presentation with mechanical precision. Photographs of my supposedly diseased chickens, medical statistics about zoonotic disease transmission, environmental impact studies that had nothing to do with my operation but looked scary when projected on a wall. "As you can see," she continued, gesturing toward images of industrial poultry facilities, "unregulated agricultural operations pose significant risks to our community's health and property values." Tom Bradley raised his hand from the third row. "Deborah, those pictures aren't from Rex's farm. I drive past his place every day. It's cleaner than most people's backyards." "Tom, we're dealing with documented evidence of environmental contamination and potential disease vectors." "What documentation?" The voice came from the back of the room, cutting through Deborah's presentation like a sword through silk. Sheriff Martinez walked down the center aisle, his boots clicking against the floor with the rhythm of inevitability. Behind him, two men in federal windbreakers followed with the patient stride of people who'd done this dance many times before. The auditorium fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning struggling against 200 people's nervous breathing. "Ms. Westfield," Martinez said, his voice carrying the formal tone reserved for official business, "I'm here to discuss some inconsistencies in your recent reports to various county agencies." Deborah's face went pale beneath her foundation. "Sheriff, this is hardly the appropriate venue. Actually, it's perfect. Public forum, lots of witnesses, everything recorded." He gestured toward the back where a county clerk operated an official recording device. "See, we've been investigating reports of harassment, fraud, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. Fascinating case." The expensive suit behind Deborah started whispering more urgently, but she waved him away with hands that trembled like autumn leaves. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Sheriff." "I'm not implying anything, ma'am. I'm stating facts backed by evidence." Martinez pulled out a tablet and began reading. "On Thursday evening, you admitted to Mr. Hawthorne that Morrison Development Group planned to eliminate agricultural protections throughout this area to facilitate a $50 million development project." Murmurs rippled through the crowd like a stone dropped in still water. "You also threatened Mr. Hawthorne with escalating legal harassment if he refused to participate in your scheme. All of this was recorded by state agents as part of an ongoing federal investigation into interstate real estate fraud." Deborah shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor like fingernails on a chalkboard. "This is completely inappropriate. I demand you cease this harassment immediately." That's when I stood up, briefcase in hand, and delivered the line I'd been rehearsing for weeks. "Deborah, the only harassment here has been yours, and thanks to your own words, recorded by federal agents, you're about to discover what real consequences look like." The auditorium erupted, neighbors demanding explanations, board members distancing themselves from their president, someone shouting about property values and criminal charges. Through the chaos, I watched one of the federal agents approach Deborah with that calm, professional demeanor that meant someone's world was about to end. Her expensive lawyer was already reaching for his phone, probably calling partners who specialized in federal criminal defense. Martha squeezed my shoulder as the crowd noise reached fever pitch. "Rex, honey, that was the most beautiful thing I've seen since my granddaughter's wedding." But the real beauty was watching Deborah realize that all her schemes, all her harassment, all her criminal conspiracy had been captured on federal recording equipment by agents who specialized in putting people like her in prison. Sometimes justice doesn't just knock on your door. Sometimes it walks into your meeting with badges and handcuffs and reads your crimes aloud in front of everyone you tried to fool. The war was over. The farmer had won. And Deborah Westfield was about to learn why you don't mess with country folks who know exactly which phone numbers to call. 6 months later, I'm sitting on my front porch watching Napoleon strut around his kingdom like he personally defeated corporate corruption. And honestly, he's not wrong. The morning air smells like fresh hay and victory as I sip coffee from a mug that reads, "World's Most Litigious Farmer," a gag gift from Martha after the trial coverage made national news. The sound of happy chickens scratching in clean dirt mixes with the distant hum of construction equipment working on something that definitely isn't luxury condominiums. Deborah Westfield got 18 months in federal prison and permanent disbarment from real estate practice. Turns out, conspiracy to commit fraud across state lines carries serious penalties, especially when you're dumb enough to confess everything to federal agents wearing recording devices. Her lawyer tried arguing entrapment, but it's hard to claim victimhood when you're caught on tape poisoning innocent chickens. Morrison Development Group collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. Jason Morrison cooperated with federal investigators and received probation in exchange for testifying against his former partners. Last I heard, he'd moved to Colorado and was learning to sleep at night again. The other board members claimed ignorance and mostly got away with public humiliation, though 2 resigned in shame and moved out of state. The new HOA president is Tom Bradley, whose first official act was passing a resolution protecting all grandfathered agricultural operations in perpetuity. But the real victory came from what we built with the settlement money. See, Morrison Development's insurance company paid out $2.8 million to settle civil rights violations against every targeted farmer in the county. My share was enough to expand my operation, but more importantly, it funded something that would have made Pete Morrison proud. The Willowbrook Agricultural Education Center sits on 5 acres donated by the new HOA, a beautiful complex of classrooms, demonstration gardens, and teaching barns that smell like possibility and fresh wood shavings. We partnered with the County Extension Office to offer classes in sustainable farming, agricultural law, and small business development for anyone wanting to start their own operation. Martha runs the literacy program where kids learn to read using books about farming and animals. Sheriff Martinez teaches a monthly seminar on agricultural rights and legal protections. Even Dr. Peterson, the vet who saved my poisoned chickens, volunteers teaching animal husbandry and health management. The irony is perfect. Deborah's attempt to eliminate agricultural operations created the most successful farming education program in 3 counties. We've helped start 12 new agricultural businesses, protected 8 existing operations from HOA harassment, and created a legal defense fund that successfully fought off 3 more development scams. Napoleon has become something of a local celebrity with his own Instagram account, @Napoleon the Rooster, that has 50,000 followers who tune in daily for his sunrise crow and occasional commentary on corporate corruption. The eggs from his girls now supply 2 local restaurants and a farmer's market that's grown from 8 vendors to 43. But my favorite part happens every Saturday morning when kids from the education program visit to help with farm chores. Watching 8-year-olds gather eggs while learning about responsibility and where food actually comes from reminds me why this fight was worth every sleepless night and legal bill. Last weekend, a little girl named Sophia asked why someone would try to get rid of chickens that make such good eggs. I explained that sometimes people get so focused on money that they forget what actually makes life valuable: community, honest work, taking care of the land and each other. She thought about this while petting one of my hens, then announced she wanted to be a farmer when she grew up so she could protect chickens from mean people. That's when I knew we'd really won. The Federal Agricultural Crimes Task Force uses our case in training seminars for prosecutors dealing with development fraud. We've been contacted by farming communities in 12 states facing similar harassment campaigns. The legal precedent we established makes it much harder for development companies to use HOA manipulation as a tool for property theft. 3 months ago, 60 Minutes did a segment called "The Chicken Farmer Who Fought Federal Fraud" that's been viewed over 2 million times online. The reporter asked what advice I'd give to other people facing similar harassment. Document everything, know your rights, and remember that bullies only win when good people stay silent, I said. And if you're really lucky, sometimes the sheriff happens to be a friend of your predecessor who believes in justice. Today, my property is worth triple what I paid for it, not because of development potential, but because people value authentic agricultural communities. The waiting list for lots in our farm-friendly neighborhood stretches 6 months. As I finish my coffee and head out to check on my girls, Napoleon crows his approval of another perfect morning in paradise, the kind you can only build by standing your ground and fighting for what matters.
Thanks for hanging out with us on HOA Stories, where the HOA Karens meet their match. If this story had you cheering or cringing, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment with your reaction, and hit subscribe so you're ready for the next wild HOA tale.